Welcome back to Timeline of World History. We have now reached the year 5000 BC and the start of the 5th millennium BC. We only have 7,000 years to go. We have already covered 195,000 years. This should be easy. Although nothing much changes as opposed to the previous millennium, the next 1,000 years would see agriculture reaching the Atlantic coast of continental Europe and the first appearance of Egypt into our story. Today, we concentrate on events in the year 5000 BC itself. First up, China and the Daxi culture. The Daxi culture was located in the Three Gorges region of the middle Yangtze River in China. It ranged from western Hubei to eastern Sichuan and the Pearl River Delta. The type site of Daxi was discovered in Kutang Gorge around Wushan, Chongqing by Nels C. Nelson in the 1920s. Daxi sites were the earliest in China to show evidence of moats and walled settlements. Despite this, people interacted and traded with those found near the Delta region, exchanging their cylindrical bottles, white plates and red pottery for jade artifacts. As was the norm for the Yangtze River area, people cultivated rice extensively. Little is known about the Daxi culture, and they would be followed in 3300 BC by the Kuya-Ling culture. One thing for certain is that following the construction of the Three Gorges Dam in 2003, the site of Daxi is no longer accessible unless you plan to have a trip underwater. Mayabang culture. The people that the Daxi traded with at the Yangtze River Delta was known as the Mayabang. The type site of Mayabang was discovered in 1959 around the Taihu Lake in Jiaxing, Zhejiang province. Other sites included Songze and Fukanshan in the Qingpu district of modern-day Shanghai. Archaeologists consider that the Mayabang and sites in northern Jiangsu were part of the same culture known as the Qingliangang culture. They realized that northern Jiangsu was the homeland of the Dawen-Ku culture. Some scholars stated that the Hemudu culture, who we touched upon previously, coexisted with the Mayabang as two separate and distinct cultures with cultural transmission between both of them. Other scholars group Hemudu with Mayabang sub-traditions. The Mayabang people cultivated rice and domesticated pigs. This did not mean that they abandoned hunting and gathering though. Remains of sika and roe deer, as well as tools made from various animal bones found at Songze, showed the importance of fishing and hunting at that time. The environment during the 5th millennium BC was warm and humid, with temperatures 2 to 3 degrees centigrade higher than today. A lush forest containing evergreen and big-leaved trees were an obvious barrier to rice cultivation. To get around this, people produced polished stone axes and adzes that were perforated using pointed awls to carry out slash and burn agriculture. No evidence has been found for using advanced tube drilling perforation. Cultivated paddy fields of both short and long-grained rice were excavated from ash pits at Songze that look exactly like those found across East Asia today. This was highly developed during the Mayabang period and would continue to do so in the Shanghai area up to the present day. A lot of different pottery vessels were found at Songze. Most of these were simple, handmade using a coil technique from local clay strips and had a brownish red color with no decoration. Various types of pottery include a fu, a cauldron with a raised waist, duo, a stem bowl, a pottery grate and an ox nose shaped vessel's ear for stringing. The earliest example of a pottery grate in China enabled firepots to have sufficient oxygen to burn the firewood, saving fuel and speeding up the cooking process. We have already mentioned that jade artifacts were sent to the Daxi culture in exchange for bottles, plates and red pottery that have been found at Mayabang sites. Two wells made of clay in a tube shape with a smooth wall and rounded bottom provided the earliest evidence of a well in China at Songze. One well was 2 meters deep that contained pottery shards, net weights and animal bones. Digging and usage of both wells showed advancement of human civilization and provided better conditions for settled life of these people. A skeleton of a 25 to 30-year-old male with a complete skull was found dated to the Majiabang period. The discovery was of great importance for the study of the ecological environment for people living at the mouth of the Yangtze River. With the expansion of the Yangtze River Delta, the Songze area was pushed farther away from the shoreline. Its land was less salty and many lakes and ponds were distributed. Water plants and fruits were available all year round. Medium and large-sized animals lived in forests. Small animals, birds and fish lived on or beside rivers, and people began to settle on the hills. At Kaohsiung site, Wuxian, Jiangsu province, the earliest textile ever found in China was discovered from 3 pieces of cloth, remnants dated to approximately 4000 BC. They were made by using a type of rib stitch rather than plain weaving that showed the Majiabang were advanced in this type of field. In 3300 BC, the Majiabang was followed by the Liangsu culture. The Yangshao culture was a Neolithic culture that was located along the Yellow River in China between 5000 and 3000 BC. It was named after Yangshao, the first excavated village of this culture that was discovered in 1921 in Henan province by Swedish archaeologist Johan Gunnar Andersson. Yes, a Swedish guy. It flourished in the provinces of Henan, Shanxi and Shanxi. It consisted of hundreds of settlements along the Yellow and Wei River regions, stretching across the northwestern plains from Shanxi province in central China to Gansu province in the west. Yangshao village was located near the confluence of the Yellow, Fen and Wei rivers. In approximately 4000 BC, carefully laid out villages were founded by hunter farmers on the Yellow and Wei rivers. The Yangshao culture itself is divided into 3 periods. The early periods, or the Banpu phase, 5000 to 4000 BC, was represented by the Banpu, Jiangshai, Beishuling and Dadiwan sites in the Wei River Valley in Shanxi. The middle period, or the Miaodugu phase, 4000 to 3500 BC, saw an expansion in all directions, with the development of hierarchies of settlements in some areas, such as Western Henan. The late period, 3500 to 3000 BC, saw a greater spread of settlement hierarchies. This saw the first wall of rammed earth in China, built around the settlement of Xishan in central Henan. Sorry for butchering all these Chinese pronunciations. The Yangshao people hunted, fished, gathered and practiced primitive agriculture. Stone tools unearthed by archaeologists consisted of fishing net sinkers, knives, shovels, millstones and arrowheads. Fishermen used nets and needles, harpoons and hooks made from bone. Craftsmen made tools from stone and jewelry from shells and animal teeth. Based on studies of the amount of carbon and nitrogen detected in bones found in graves, archaeologists determined that farmers, pigs and dogs ate lots of millet because it was the region's only carbon type of food. In fact, millet made up 90% of the diet of some animals. Some sites used foxtail millet as their main crop, others used broomcorn millet, and 1 or 2 may have cultivated rice. Whether they used slash and burn techniques or intensive agriculture is still a matter of debate. Once the soil was exhausted, residents packed up their belongings and moved to new lands, constructing new villages in the process. By the middle Yangshao period, permanent settlements such as Jiangxi contained grinding stones for making flour and raised floor buildings used for storage of surplus grain. Some of the earliest examples of clay pottery found in China were created as far back as 6000 BC in the Yangshao area. Pottery consisted of fine white, red and black painted pottery with human, animal and geometric designs. However, Unlike the later Longshan culture, the Yangshao did not use the potter's wheel to produce their pottery. Excavations found that children were buried inside painted pottery jars. These jars must have been large. Between 4000 and 3500 BC, a bright red mineral known as cinnabar was used for a variety of uses, from ceramics to walls and floors of buildings for ritual ceremonies. In May 2016, archaeologists discovered evidence of a 5,000-year-old beer concoction and the earliest known occurrence of barley at Miyaya, Songze province. Researchers found yellowish remnants in wide-mouthed pots, funnels and amphorae excavated from the site, which suggested that these vessels were used for beer brewing, filtration and storage. According to Live Science, stoves were probably used to provide heat for mashing grains. Beer recipe used a variety of starchy grains, including barley, as well as tubers that would have added starch to fermentation and sweetness to flavor of the beer. The Miyaya site consisted of ceramic pots, funnels and stoves in pits that date to between 3400 and 2900 BC. Yangshao villages covered an area of 10 to 14 acres that composed of groups of square, oblong and round houses around a central square. At the center of the village there was a lodge-like dwelling or ceremonial center 60 feet long with rooms and multiple hearths. The largest example was found in Songze, 20.1 meters from east to west, 12.2 meters north to south and 190 square meters in size. The floor consisted of several layers with a burnt hard black layer below and a cement-like surface made from lime and sand. A kiln was found with a round fire pit and pottery chamber alongside two surrounding fire channels. Houses were built by digging a round rectangular pit a few feet deep, rammed, and a lattice of wattle woven over it. The lattice was plastered with mud and rammed again. A few short wattle poles were placed around the top with more wattle woven to it. After being plastered with mud, a framework of poles was placed to make a cone shaped for the roof. Poles were added to support the roof and then thatched using millet stalks. Inside, a shallow fireplace was located in the middle of the house, a bench alongside the wall, and a bed of cloth. Food and various items were placed or hung against the walls. Outside the house, a pen was built to keep animals. Burials were complex. Like the segmented village structures, graves were arranged in groupings, with spaces between groups. A lot of attention was paid to burials. Many graves did not reveal skeletal remains, but an arrangement of bones clearly indicated that bodies of the deceased were dug up and ceremonially reburied. Known as secondary burial, this practice endures in Chinese cultural areas today. The deceased were buried in temporary graves until they decomposed. After this, graves were reopened, bones were cleaned, and then buried again in a final resting place. The Yangshao devoted the deceased by investment of considerable amount of resources in graves. Graves were dug as deep chambers with ledges along the walls that contained pottery and other valuable objects. Floors inside graves were paved with wooden planking and mats. Many grave goods indicated distinctions in wealth and status of the occupants. Poorer burials included one or two pots, whilst some of the larger graves surrounding the deceased contained beautifully decorated pots, fine tools, and ornaments that indicated the role that the deceased had played amongst the living. In one large grave, nearly 100 pots, along with other objects, celebrated the grandeur of the occupant, whose skeleton was buried under opulent grave goods that had moved on top of him over thousands of years. The oldest Yangshao site was Banpu, an excavated village along the Wei River east of Qian, Shanxi province. Discovered in 1953, the village contained kilns for making pottery, 250 graves that included 73 children buried inside earthen pots, a 300-meter long moat to keep out wild animals, 200 storage cellars, and 46 semi-subterranean round or square houses. All doors face towards a large 160 square meter one-room dwelling that reflected the clan organization of the group. Pottery activity was carried out at 6 kilns in the east of the village using fine-grained and sandy coarse clay. On pottery fragments, 12 different kinds of markings or symbols included some of the main strokes used in Chinese characters. Another candidate for earliest Chinese writing, perhaps. Whether these were writing or not, these symbols did have some meaning for the village of Banpu and the Yangshao culture in general. Other artifacts found at Banpu included stone axes, fish hooks, fish bone forks, bone needles, and stone, bone and ivory ornamentation. The Yangshao culture was followed by the Longshan culture in 3000 BC. Let us now head to the fringes of Europe. In the last episode we looked at the Samar culture of the lower Volga river. Emerging to the west of the Samara in approximately 5000 BC was the Dnieper Donets culture, a hunter-gatherer Mesolithic culture located to the north of the Black Sea between the Dnieper and the Donets river. It lasted until 4200 BC when it was replaced by the Yamna culture. As stated, there are parallels between the Dnieper Donets and Samara. According to the Kurgan hypothesis, as proposed by Maria Gimbutas, a larger horizon was drawn from the lower half of the Dnieper to the mid to lower Volga. Dmitry Teleginru assigned the Dnieper Donets to a broad cultural region that spanned the Vistula River in Poland southeast to the Dnieper itself. J. P. Mallory, who wrote In Search of the Indo-Europeans in 1989, included this area within the limits of the Proto-Indo-European people. Those warlike cultures that Maria Gimbutas advocated with first the Samar culture. The role of the Dnieper Donets and its language in comparison to the Pontic Caspian cultures like the succeeding Shredny Stog and Yamna cultures is open to debate. The display of cultural traits does point to long-standing mutual contacts or genetic relations between them. Physical remains found in graves have been characterized by the advocates of the Kurgan hypothesis as late Cro-Magnon. You know, those first human ancestors that arrived from Africa 45,000 years ago. This is opposed to those Neolithic cultures found in the Balkans who have has been described as Old European and Meek. This is a theory that doesn't find favor with many scholars. The pottery of this culture is similar to those found in other Mesolithic cultures that lived on the edge of the expanding Neolithic cultures further south and east. In particular, its pointed base was just like those found with the Ertebölle of northern Germany and Denmark, which we discussed in the previous episode. As a reminder, the theory goes that the pottery started with the Samara, made its way up the Volga River, and then proceeded across the Baltic shoreline, influencing other Mesolithic cultures. It looks like this type of pottery made its way westwards into Ukraine as well. You did not need agriculture to have pottery. Likewise, when agriculture started in the Near East, pottery was not invented and wouldn't be for about 4,000 years. Bordering the Dnieper Donets culture in the west was the linear pottery culture that had been active for approximately 500 years. By 5000 BC, a subgroup of the linear pottery emerged in Hungary, spreading its influence over Central Europe for the next 1600 years. The Lengyel culture was a European Neolithic culture situated on the Middle Danube, named after the type site located in the town of Lengyel in Tolna County, Hungary. It was closely related to the stroke-ornamented Rössen and funnel beaker cultures to the north and to the west, and would be succeeded by the corded ware culture in 3400 BC. Rather than being a narrow, unified archaeological culture, the Lengyel was a widespread interaction sphere or cultural horizon that was centered in western central European part of the Danube and its tributaries. We know this as Lengyel pottery could be found in Western Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Austria, Poland, and parts of former Yugoslavia. Similar pottery styles appeared in parts of Germany and Switzerland. The pottery itself tended to be utilitarian and unpainted. Between 1882 and 1888, the cleric Mor Wosinski excavated a large number of artifacts from 90 graves found in the vicinity of the Lengyel enclosure. Based on the recovered pottery, Oswald Mengin of the University of Vienna introduced the term Lengyel culture in the 1920s. Some of the artifacts found included copper in the form of cylindrical beads, cold-hammered coppered ribbons, and copper ribbons with ends curled into spirals. We have not got to the stage of smelting copper though, so we cannot call this the Copper Age yet. As for the enclosure, well, these were surrounded by one or more circular ditches with causeways. This would be similar to those found in southern England in the early 4th millennium BC. Most circular oval ditch enclosures can be found in Austria, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. It is likely that these were used for celestial observation, a forerunner to the standing stones of the late 4th millennium or early 3rd millennium BC. Settlements consisted of small houses and the similar longhouse that was found with the linear pottery culture. The only difference is that the Lengyel longhouse was trapezoidal in style, abandoning the triple segmentation and rectangular plan of the linear pottery. This change of architecture could be a result of a change in climate following the end of the warm period in approximately 4700 BC. Houses needed to be sturdier, so deep bedding trenches were dug to maintain the posts. The longhouse itself was abandoned by small rectangular houses in 4300 to 4200 BC. Another effect of the changing climate was that some Lengyel sites started to have greater reliance on hunting. Does this mean that agriculture was starting to be abandoned? Well, no. Agriculture and stock raising, mainly cattle and pigs, continued to be practiced, but a large number of wild faunal remains suggested that crops were not doing so well in the poor climate conditions. This did not prevent agriculture from spreading further north and west though, and we will look at further Neolithic cultures as the 5th millennium BC progresses. Next time, we'll head to Saxony in Germany to look at our first Neolithic enclosure known as the Gossec Circle. We will head to Romania, Moldova and western Ukraine to discuss a Neolithic and possibly first Copper Age culture to emerge in Europe known as Cucuteni-Tripillian culture, and return to southern Mesopotamia to catch up with the Ubaid period, where both maritime activities and influence to the north occurred. For now, it's time to say goodbye from Shane of Timeline of World History, who has done excellent research for this show, and me, Dan, the fan of history. Until next time, enjoy your history, and goodbye.